The Christmas dinner was supposed to be the one night of the year when our entire family sat around the same table, laughed about old memories, exchanged gifts, and pretended that nothing had ever gone wrong between us. Instead, it became the night I finally discovered who my daughter-in-law really was. My name is Richard, and I had spent 40 years building a life I could be proud of. I wasn't a billionaire, I wasn't born into money. Everything my wife, Margaret, and I owned had been earned through long hours. Difficult decisions and sacrifices we rarely talked about. Margaret had stood beside me through every struggle. She was the woman who worked 2 jobs when our children were young. She was the woman who sold her jewelry when I needed money to keep my small business alive. She never complained, she never demanded expensive things. To me, Margaret wasn't low class. She was the reason I had a life worth living. Our son Daniel had always been close to us. But after he married Victoria, everything changed. Victoria came from a wealthy family. She cared deeply about appearances, designer clothes, expensive restaurants, exclusive clubs, and making sure everyone knew exactly how much money she had. At first, Margaret tried desperately to accept her. "She's different from us," Margaret once told me. Give her time, so I did. But Victoria never gave Margaret the same courtesy. She mocked the way my wife dressed. She criticized the food Margaret prepared once. She laughed at our old kitchen and said, "I didn't realize Daniel grew up in a place like this." Margaret simply smiled every time Victoria insulted her. Margaret found a way to forgive her. That Christmas, I decided to host dinner at our home. I decorated the house with lights, candles, and the old Christmas ornaments our children had made when they were little. Margaret spent 2 days preparing the meal. There was turkey, mashed potatoes, roasted vegetables, homemade bread, peas in every dish our family had loved for decades. She was exhausted but happy. "Do you think everyone will enjoy it?" she asked me. I kissed her forehead. "They'll love it." When Daniel and Victoria arrived, Victoria stepped through the door, wearing an expensive dress and carrying a designer handbag. She looked around, then she smiled. Not warmly, almost mockingly. "Wow," she said. "You really went all out." Margaret smiled. I wanted Christmas to feel special. Victoria looked at the dining table. Then she whispered loud enough for everyone to hear, "It feels more like a neighborhood potluck." I saw Margaret's smile disappear for half a second. But she recovered. "Come sit down," she said gently. Dinner began peacefully. For the first 20 minutes, everyone talked about work, travel, and holiday plans. Then Victoria noticed the plates. "Margaret," she said, "why are these dishes so old?" Margaret looked confused. "They were my mother's." Victoria laughed seriously. Daniel shifted uncomfortably. "Victoria, please, what?" she asked. "I'm just asking." Margaret lowered her eyes. "They're sentimental." Victoria picked up her fork. "Well, sentiment doesn't make something valuable." That sentence changed the atmosphere. I looked at my son Daniel. He sighed. "Mom, Dad, let's just enjoy dinner." Margaret nodded, of course. A few minutes later, Victoria started talking about a charity event her parents had attended. She mentioned wealthy families, luxury cars, and expensive vacations. Then she looked directly at Margaret. "You know, some people really need to learn their place." Margaret didn't respond. I did. "That's enough." Victoria raised an eyebrow. "I wasn't talking about you. I know exactly who you were talking about." Daniel finally spoke. "Victoria, stop." She rolled her eyes. Then Margaret accidentally spilled a little gravy near her plate. "I'm sorry," she said. Immediately reaching for a napkin, Victoria suddenly pushed her chair backward. "You can't even have a proper dinner." Margaret froze. "Victoria, you embarrass me every time I come here." Daniel stood up. "That's enough." But Victoria wasn't finished. She stepped toward Margaret. "You pretend you're some respectable woman, but you're nothing but low-class trash." The room went silent. I stood. "Leave." Victoria stared at me. "What?" I said, "Leave my house." She laughed. "You can't throw me out." "I can, and I will." Margaret touched my arm. "Richard, please." I looked at her. She was trying to prevent another family fight, but then Victoria did something none of us expected. She raised her hand and slapped Margaret across the face. The sound echoed through the room. For a moment, nobody moved. Margaret's hand slowly went to her cheek. Daniel looked horrified. Victoria. I felt something inside me break. I stepped between them. You will never touch my wife again. Victoria looked at me as if she couldn't understand why I was angry. She provoked me. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. My wife provoked you. She embarrassed me. No, I said. You embarrassed yourself. Daniel stood there trembling. Victoria, apologize. She crossed her arms. I'm not apologizing. Daniel looked at her for a long moment. Then he removed his wedding ring. Victoria's face changed. What are you doing? I'm done, she laughed nervously. You can't be serious. I've watched you disrespect my parents for years. I've made excuses for you. I told myself you were stressed, spoiled, or simply different. He placed the ring on the table. But tonight you crossed the line. Victoria's confidence disappeared. You would choose them over me. Daniel looked at his mother. Then at me. They never made me choose. That sentence brought tears to Margaret's eyes. Victoria grabbed her purse. You'll regret this. She stormed out. Daniel stayed for several minutes. Nobody spoke. Then Margaret whispered, Daniel. She's still your wife. He looked at his mother. And you're still my mother. He walked over and hugged her. I'm sorry, Margaret cried. Why? Because I should have protected you sooner. The next morning, Daniel came to our house again. He brought something with him. It was an old wooden Christmas ornament. Margaret recognized it immediately. You made that when you were 6. Daniel smiled. I found it in storage. He placed it on our Christmas tree. I want this to be where it belongs. Over the following months, Daniel filed for divorce. Victoria tried everything to get him back. She apologized, blamed alcohol, blamed stress, blamed Margaret, blamed everyone except herself. But Daniel refused. He also discovered something that made him even more ashamed. Victoria had been telling her friends that our family was poor and embarrassing. She had even told people that Margaret had married beneath her. Daniel finally understood that his wife didn't love him for who he was. She loved the lifestyle she thought he could provide. Months later, Christmas came again. This time our table was smaller. But it was warmer. Daniel arrived with a homemade pie. He had learned the recipe from Margaret. I hope it's good, he said. Margaret smiled. If it's terrible, I'll teach you again, we laughed. And for the first time in years, our family felt whole later that evening. Daniel stood beside the Christmas tree. Mom, Dad. He said, I learned something last Christmas. I looked at him. What money can buy a beautiful table? It can buy expensive clothes. It can buy a mansion. He looked at the old wooden ornament. But it can't buy dignity. Margaret smiled through her tears. And it can't buy family. Daniel nodded. Exactly that night, I realized something important. Sometimes people think being wealthy makes them better than everyone else. It doesn't. Your character isn't measured by the price of your clothes, the size of your house, or the restaurant where you eat. It's measured by how you treat people who have nothing to offer you. Victoria had everything money could buy, but she lost the one thing she couldn't purchase back. Respect in my wife. She never needed an expensive dress, a luxury car, or a fancy dining room to prove her worth. She had something far more valuable. She had dignity, and on that Christmas night, sitting beside the woman who had stood with me through every hardship, I realized I had been the richest man in the room all along.